So our vision is to help as many people as humanly possible be able to grow, build good soil, and that's our mission, and that's what we're going to achieve. So our vision is based on 4 principles, which we call the 4 petal principles. And the number 1 is life, so you need to add life in the form of microorganisms and composting worms to your system. Number 2 is to remineralize and nourish, and remineralizing is a bit of a buzzword in the gardening and farming sector because our soils have lost so much of their trace elements and minerals. And to boost your plant immunity, plants have an immune system like we have an immune system. So plants need to be able to respond to threats of any form, diseases and the environment, pests, and also if they have a good immune system, then they have a higher yield as well. So that's petal number 3. And then balancing your energies in much the same way that we would maybe have some mint tea on a hot day and something to invigorate you on the opposite hand. The biodynamic principle brings those elements into play. And so those are the 4 petals. And when once I understood that those are the 4 founding pillars, then I was able to build from there on out with the program. Then we have what we call a 3-step program. It's a very simple program that, and we'll go into this in a bit more detail. Once a year, you supercharge your soil. That's in May, in autumn, when the soil becomes very busy. And then it's now getting ready for the spring afterwards. And then twice a year in spring and in late summer, we boost it. And basically our boosting is mycorrhiza, which we will touch on again a little bit later. A lot of you will have heard of a lot of these principles, and some of you will not. So I'm trying to reach all of you. And then we maintain with one simple action through the year, which is compost extracting, and you'll see that now. So we've put 15 years of hard work. We've been able to consolidate into a 1-minute animated video. And this is the crux of it all. This is the supercharge, which this is how you start your process. This is how you enter the natural sphere of gardening. And this is what you do once a year. So. Everything is fitted onto one page. So if you go onto the website, this one page, it kind of tells you everything. It gives you the introduction, the overview as to who we are, the 4 petals, the 4 layers in the supercharging is all there, plus your little checking system. So that's what you'd be able to access. Then we have online support. So we've got a membership website where you go and you get online support. We've got gardening guides there that is being built on regularly, and especially from now on out, where we will start including a lot of other things. We've just been focusing on the absolute basics, which is what we're covering today. There's a how-to section, so anything you need to know, you can access the how-to section, the checklist. Then once you join on the supercharging system, you will get your email prompts, which will guide you, and then a mentoring process, which you basically get free mentoring for 1 year, but we'll touch on that at the end. I've spent the last 2 years in the Kalahari, and that's why this is called From Red Soil to Topsoil, because I've done this and have managed to do fantastic amounts of topsoil, which you'll get to see doing exactly what I'm going to be telling you today. This is an area that my brother was farming, and in fact, I wish I'd taken a photograph when I entered that space, because it had a white layer which sealed the soil at the top. It was incredibly hard. This has been picked twice already. The first time was not enough, and I had these clumps of hard sort of brick-type soil stuff coming out, and we literally had to bash that soil flat again. I mean, a rake was not going to touch sides with that exercise. But this is essentially it on the before. And then basically starting, so you can see there's no topsoil really to speak of, but we had started with some of the material that we had. And that is the step 3 that you saw in the little video where you flick this compost extract out. It's so easy to do, anybody can do it. And it becomes actually quite a fun element, and you're quite grateful for it. This photograph is not for the carrot or for my unflattering position, but you'll see the sclerosis in those plants already, which is basically the yellowing of the plants. So because that was a soil that had been used in chemical farming process, you could immediately see that the plants were suffering in their first season. And that's what you'll expect to find in gardening systems. And so that's just, you can see not much topsoil. You can see topsoil is starting to creep through there already, or some sort of anything that you could call soil, but still at a very young stage. Within 4 months, this is what I had there already. Scratch anywhere and you get worms, and there was not a worm in sight, I can assure you, in the middle of the Kalahari. 4 to 6 months, you're dealing with layers of the stuff, and there's no compost added. I didn't have the luxury of compost, and in fact we don't say that you should add, not that you shouldn't add or should not add compost, but we don't add compost to this process. And within 2 years you can see the soil is completely different. It's now soil. It's no longer that partial decomposing compost stage. It's real soil. You can see the crummy texture of the soil. That's humus. And this is what we want you to do. So a lot of you won't even know who I am and how I get to speak about this. I spent 15 years here in Cape Town doing, installing beautiful gardens, maintaining them, developing lovely relationships with clients. You know, I really enjoyed my time. My daughter was a toddler then, I could take her with me. It was great. So I spent a long time doing this, and but during this process, something was amiss already. So I had studied, I was a qualified landscape technologist, as they say. I'd gone through everything, I was taught everything, and I went straight into this industry doing everything that I was taught to do. But I immediately felt that there were massive shortcomings. And this is what I call from diligence, following conventional wisdom, diligence to what I call unsubscribing. I immediately started experiencing weeds. I now have a totally different relationship with weeds. I now understand that weeds is a form of communication. There are books about how they can analyze your soil based on the weeds that you attract, because weeds come to certain soils. They are actually the healers of the soil. So they come into the soil to bring certain nutritional elements in, or to break up the soil, various functions that they do. And when clients were paying me the amounts of money that they were paying me, I felt like a bit of a fraud actually, because I really didn't know how to deal with these nutrient deficiencies. And I then followed the advice of what I had been taught. And I have applied massive amounts of magnesium sulfate for magnesium deficiency, iron chelate for iron deficiency, you know, higher this, lower this. Trace elements was a buzzword, and to no avail. And I got experts in, and I realized that they didn't know. So then I started really getting scared. And pests. This process, the conventional process, attracts a lot of pests. You will know that if you've been through this process yourself. And then you're trapped. Now you have to start using pesticides. And at the time, we were using very aggressive pesticides, organophosphates, and then a lot of them are now illegal. South Africa was still using them. But I was shocked to discover how quickly you got resistance. Within 1 year, the pesticides weren't working. And just now recently, we had the lily borer on the farm, which totally annihilated the lilies overnight, from nice and tall down to nothing. And it's because I say, one of the reasons is because my mom had been using a very aggressive pesticide, I think for 20 years. And it just has absolutely no effect, and yet it's very destructive to the environment and to everything else. So those were my experiences. That's what I was having to deal with. And I needed to ask this question, why? But you're so busy, you're running around sites, and you're so frustrated that you have to now start asking these questions when you're meant to have the answers. And at times I avoided my clients when I knew they were going to come to me and ask me a question because I didn't have the answer. So I really was come to a painful, I had to, come to this realization. So this is our lesson, NGP 101. Nature works in an action-reaction way. And what I mean by that is that all energy comes from the sun. So the sun, your photons get converted to sugars in plants. That's the process. That's the source of all our sustenance as well. So the sugars are created in the plants and they get converted, they get pushed down into the root zone. You'll know that from carrots, your root vegetables are high in carbohydrates. Sugars and carbohydrates is almost one and the same. So those sugars gets pushed down into the root zone, and it's long been a measure of a plant health. It's called your Brix readings. So they squash the sap of the plant and they test that liquid, and its level of sugar indicates the health level of the plant. So you can do something to a plant, and within about an hour already, you can start testing to see the effect that it's had on the plant. I wish we could treat ourselves that way. Wouldn't it be nice if we had diseases and things? So what happens is that the sugars then get pushed out of the root zone, and in those sugars are enzymes, and those enzymes are very specific. They have a very specific nutrient that attaches to them. And that is the way plants actually get their nourishment. And I'll explain to you what the misconception has been up until now. The other thing that happens is that sugars attract microorganisms. And if you've been involved in any process of alcohol making or kombucha making, you'll know that what you add to your tea or whatever your alcohol is you add a cup of sugar because the microorganisms love it. And they multiply. And you'll see the tie-in with microorganisms, how important microorganisms are in the whole process. But what I'm essentially saying is that a healthy plant is going to attract millions of microorganisms through the sugars that it pushes out. One of the ways is through nitrogen fixing. I'd forgotten how much nitrogen there was in the atmosphere until I was doing some homework with my daughter and realized she was asked the question, it's nearly 80% of the atmosphere contains nitrogen, 78%. Oxygen's only 21%. So it stands to reason that there's enough nitrogen in the atmosphere already, and our plants need nitrogen, as you all know. I'm sure a lot of you have applied LAN, ammonia, all those things. So the nitrogen fixing bacteria then multiply with all these sugars, and they then fix nitrogen onto the roots. So you can see those big globules is nature. That's nitrogen. It's right there. The bacteria that then die are very high in nitrogen themselves, and they then get broken down further. So there's copious amounts of nitrogen around a plant that's healthy. The other thing is that you have a fantastic natural pesticide mechanism in place already. There is no more effective form of pest control than biological pest control. The microorganisms themselves will annihilate any potential pest, for the pure and simple reason that they get their sustenance from the sugars that the plant exudes out of its roots. So you have microorganisms that literally stand there and act as guard to the plant, and they will attack any predator that tries to come in. The modern way is through the osmosis way. So what happens there, I remember learning about osmosis in biology when it goes from a high concentration through a semi-permeable membrane to a lower concentration. I remember that very clearly. And so this is basically how we fertilize our plants now. And we fertilize it either chemically, organically if you're a little bit more conscious, using raw manures too. But essentially the principle is the same. Yes, there's degrees of bad and good. The chemical is not as good, obviously, as the organic. And the organic does hold on to the nutrients a little bit longer, but essentially it's still going into water solution, and it's still going into the plant whether the plant likes it or not. What then happens is the plant disconnects from its life force. So it disconnects, it's feeling full, essentially, to use a sort of animated language. It's feeling full, it disconnects. That white stuff at the bottom is the mycorrhiza, which we'll touch on, and it now loses its ability to actually feed itself and it becomes dependent. It now relies on you to irrigate it, to feed it, and to help it when any pests come, and they do come. Then there are other considerations. So now I'm just going to go into a bit of a pros and cons scenario. There's so many benefits. When you're going the natural way, the plant actually has a frequency to it that insects detect. And this is all science. I mean, I've seen this on National Geographic and those sorts of programs. So they can pick up on a high vibrant or a high frequency, and they come in. Your pollinators come in. They also, though, conversely, can pick up on low frequencies. The pests recognize them, realize that this plant it's very watery. The sap is very watery. It's actually not feeling so lekker. And it comes in and does what nature wants it to do, is to get rid of it. And I think a lot of our food is grown this way. So I say to people that listen, we're growing food that's fit for insect consumption. So I don't want food that's fit for insect consumption. The other thing is our water sources. I mean, I've been driving around this country for a long time, and over the years I've noticed, just my own observation, that the rivers have gone green. I don't know if you've noticed it. They really have. I mean, the Orange River, which was always actually very brown, is also now very green. And this is why. It's because the soil can't hold onto its water even. And the fertilizers go into solution, they go into the water source, and they end up in our rivers. That blue color is not from a swimming pool. I mean, these are the colors of waters that we should expect to be able to swim in. But we don't. We swim in a green sludge, if you're brave enough. There's a totally different look about your plant when it's a natural plant. It's got this lime green, vibrant look about it. And the opposite happens when it's fed by chemicals. I recognize it like this when I'm driving past lands, fields, commercial fields. It's this dark, dull green. It looks terrible for me now. And I've educated my daughter to recognize it too. So she'll go, oh, mommy, they've just applied, nitrogen. And we have that conversation already. The other thing is that natural soils will hold on to nutrients. The whole natural system is designed to hold on to the nutrients, like I explained. It sits there, and as the plant needs it, it becomes available to the plant. So it's the best form of slow-release nutrients that you're ever going to get. Also true, if you're fertilizing with a lot of chemicals, you're going to have toxic buildup in your soil. One of the most common things is that your soil goes quite hard. Your magnesium buildup. I mean, you can literally build a house with some of that soil if you carve it up. It's so hard. And the negative spin-off of that, I just wanted to include a picture, is actually soil erosion, because it's such a big problem. I mean, we're ending up with islands at our river mouths with all the soil that's come down. And don't think it's just the farmers. We're always blaming the farmers. The residential gardeners following the same principles. And I stand and I look after a storm and I watch the soil flowing out of houses and into our storm drains, and I know it's from poor gardening practices too. So we really also need to look at ourselves. You then supplement fertilize with the natural way. I've come here now into this environment. I don't take anything anymore. I used to. I've come into this environment, and I felt like I wanted to take a general a vitamin. And the dosage is 2 of these big vitamins. It's just way too much. I've taken a quarter. I take a quarter. So that is what I mean by supplementing. And that's fine. I can see that my body's handling that. Anything more is just extreme and having to go into the stormwater system, So it's the same with gardening. You can take organic fertilizer, and we use Tailborn Organics, and we just reduce our dosage. If you've got roses, of course they're going to need more help. If you've got hybrid plants, and we've got some fashionable plants out there, and people want to be trendy, if you're going to buy those things, you're going to need to supplement. But it's supplementing. The other side is the fertilizing dependency. There you need to strictly stick to your dosage to make sure that they're getting what they need. Low water consumption. I mean, without a doubt, you can reduce your water consumption by about 50% with the natural principles. If you want to go out to our show garden later on, you'll see there's a bucket of soil there. The ability to hold on to moisture is quite phenomenal. The sample that you see there was done on a virgin fishhook where he doesn't have irrigation. And you'll see the soil that was created without any irrigation, and the ability of that soil to hold on to water. Soil holds on to more water than any dams on Earth. I don't know about today, with every year that goes by, our planet seems to sort of get worse, but that's where the water is held on our planet, not in dams, it's held in the soils. And with this mechanism of the layering that we spoke about, I think there's some sort of greenhouse, I don't know for sure, but I'll explore this. There's some sort of greenhouse effect that goes on. It's held in the soil, and as it sort of sweats, it doesn't go off, and it just circulates and stays there. And it works really well. We had a power failure, and I was terrified to go back into my garden 5 days later when I came back, and I thought all my vegetables were going to be lying limp. Now, you're talking about spinach and lettuce and things like that, which you would think would go limp, and none of them did. I walked in, and I could have sworn the irrigation had been on. So you're not going to get that effect tomorrow if you supercharge tomorrow. You'll get that greenhouse effect going. You'll be able to conserve some amount of water, but you want to push it to the next level, that your soil is actually also doing it. And from the 1st of November, I don't know, apparently buckets or something. I don't know what you guys are going to be doing. And the other extreme, of course, is high water consumption. There's nothing that makes a plant more thirsty than the chemical process, and the soil that won't hold onto it, and all those sorts of things. So, I had to, keep following what I was taught, follow the modern way, or unsubscribe. And in fact, when you know it with such clarity, it doesn't become a choice. You just have to do it. So this is the Natural Gardening Principles program. That's the sheet that I showed you. It's everything all on one page. You start with the supercharge. You start with the layering. That is a picture of a client's garden that was done 1 month after the supercharge was done. As I said, you do it in autumn, once you're in the program. You start now. There's no better time to start than now. And look at that, 1 month later, she already had results. So that's step 1 is supercharging and layering 1. So lucerne is a legume, and it retains its nutrition. So it's a very good material to use for your green layer. So that's what we do. We're doing wonderful tests with other herbs that we're drying, seeing what the earthworms like. There's some herbs that earthworms go ballistic for. So we're developing relationships with farmers. We'll be growing these herbs. By next year, we'll be blending it. But at the moment, it's lucerne, wonderful results. And then we recommend, I want to just show you, this is very scientific, so we want to just include a very brief video here. What it's going to tell you is that the old notion of putting carbons into your soil to build the organic content of your soil is now not so scientifically viable. They've proved this. Greens is. So please, thank you.
The focus of this study was natural systems. Its findings could have important implications for soil management. Current soil management practices are based on the idea that adding slow-decaying plant residues is the most effective way to increase soil organic matter. However, for soils with the potential to bond additional carbon with minerals, a different strategy may work. The results of this study suggest that a superior approach may be to add fresh residues and manage the soil's microbial community in order to increase the efficiency with which the plant litter retains carbon.
When I saw this video, I was doing hula hoops on my own. I was so excited because everything I had done, I had got to my conclusions, and then I saw this video. So it was fantastic affirmation for me, and great, because one of the problems we always face with natural is how scientific is it, and it's very scientific. They just don't push it out there. So you use fresh greens as well. I grew some cowpea, which is also a legume. I used that, I threw that down. So you're going to, and this is what you'll get from us, you're going to put down the dried, you can use some of your own fresh. Then you inoculate it with soil build, which is basically worm soil, which has got the worm cocoons in it, and some worms as well. They land it on their food source, they go straight to town, they're happy, and they start decomposing it. You then do the compost extract, which is basically in a good cup of soil. You've got more microbes in it than people on the planet. So you take the compost extract from us, you stir, you saw that stirring thing, it multiplies the microorganisms, and you just flick that out there. It doesn't need to be a spraying, it doesn't need to cover everything, you just flick it out and it inoculates. You've got now everything. You add the trace elements into that. Wonderful work for Dr. Maynard Murray that you can go and have some research over. But how important trace elements are there? There are the electrolytes to the whole system. It's needed for all biological and chemical reactions to take place. So you add that into the mix. You add how easy it is to do. I mean, you can train somebody in a split second. We are basically starting to make a lot of our own stuff. So we are doing a lot of the biodynamic principles ourselves to add into it. And we're making this ourselves. We include it already in the compost extract. It's fantastic stuff. And we use great water. To make this, we get water from the springs. And while we're on water, water is very important. You need the best quality water that you can find. So here it's great. You can go down to Newland Spring. You can get fresh water here. Rainwater. If you can't, boil water. If you can't, you need to use your municipal water. You let it stand. The chlorine will evaporate. And then you can use it. It's not the best water, but it's fine. So after the chlorine's evaporated, you soak this stuff and it'll work. But then when you then add more water, make sure that it already has been standing. But I think mostly in Cape Town, you're quite fortunate. And then finally, you add your layer of carbons. So that's your carbon chains. Everything hitches onto your carbon chains. You need that. So you've got all your elements in this one simple little exercise. And then it works. So we recycle organic thatch from people's homes. This was a waste product. It was just going by the way. We shred it. It's fantastic for the purposes of carbon building. It also has that sort of straw effect, so it keeps the air in the system. Air is very important. And we also then have some palm fiber. You can see here how the mushrooms love it. Well, that's quite important because young soils are very bacterial dominant. And as your soil evolves, it becomes fungal dominant. So the fungus that then comes included in this via this speeds up the process a bit. And then you can actually then grow more evolved plants in your gardens. Then step 2 in the 3-step program is to maintain. So on a fortnightly basis, you just take a little bit of this compost extract, you soak it, you add your trace elements, you stir it, and you flick it. Soak, stir, and flick. And then step 3 is to boost twice a year. So in January and September, you boost by adding this mycorrhiza. The symbiosis is so close with the mycorrhiza. If you look at this, you'll actually see it's actually an invasion. That's your mycorrhiza, these dark blobs here. That's your mycorrhiza that's invaded the root. It's attached itself there, and it's sent its hyphae, its little roots, out into the soil. But it's actually very, very beneficial. So you don't know where the one ends and the other one, but that is how symbiotic it is, and it just extends out into the roots, out into the soil for ages. It's got no cell walls, so it's single cellular. The tests that they're doing now, they actually see electrical impulses going through. It sends messages and signals around. It connects plants. It connects mother plants to daughter plants, believe it or not. And so it's vital. And it's the one microorganism that won't multiply in the compost extract process. So you need to do it separately. The rest seem to multiply in the water and when you stir it, but this one doesn't. And then you just replenish your supercharge twice a year as well. So just keep on with that process and you'll get there. And that's the little checklist that we have. It's obviously there on a weekly basis. You don't need to do that. It's just you tick there whenever you've done something. It's great then for record keeping, and the following year you can see what it is that you did do. Then the support, because this is very daunting for people. As simple as we've managed to get it, it becomes very daunting because it's new. So we try and give you all the support that we can. As I said, there's the gardening guides, there's the how-to section, there's the prompting emails, and there's the mentoring capacity as well. That's the membership website. Thank you. So.